Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. So it's been a crazy few weeks in Alberta with the leak of the voters list and the various machinations of the different separatist groups who are doing their bit to try and force a referendum on sovereignty by the fall, and Danielle Smith capitulating to pretty much all of their plans at all points in time. And there's a few things I just kind of wanted to touch on as part of this, which is essentially that this kind of feeling of inevitability doesn't need to exist, because this referendum shouldn't happen at all. The fact is that this is a tiny minority of the voting population in the province who have figured out a way to leverage the impact that they have in order to force Danielle Smith in particular to do the things that they want her to do, largely because they have managed to take control of the UCP mechanisms internally by getting themselves appointed to the party apparatus, and are in the process of trying to take it over. And there has been a call by one of the separatist leaders for people who believe in the cause to all take out memberships so that they can start flooding riding associations and trying to ensure that separatist candidates are nominated within those ridings so that they will be on the ballot by the next election. And there's a lot that needs to be said about this, because yes, grassroots organizing is theoretically a great thing within political parties, but it is being weaponized in a way because normal people and average everyday Albertans are letting it happen. And this goes back to a lot of the principles I talked about in my book, Unbroken Machine, which is about how parties should have strong grassroots memberships who do things like the contested nominations for candidates on ballots and so on. Those are how democracy is supposed to work within our system. The problem is that the majority of people who, we're going to call normies, who aren't the crazy separatists who are believing in the most ridiculous conspiracy theories out there and who are radicalized after decades of, guzzling grievance porn from the government, compounded by the brain rot from social media, particularly Facebook, normal people have checked out of the process. Normal people are not buying party memberships. Normal people are not engaging in the nomination process. Normal people are not engaging within the party structures the way that they used to, and that has left the opening for the separatist loons, and they are absolute swivel-eyed loons, to come in and do that function, because there's not enough normies who are doing that kind of role. And that's kind of where I think we need to focus a lot of what's going on in Alberta right now. Again, the separatists are a tiny minority of people within the province, at least the hardcore ones. You get all these polls about people who are separatist curious, whatever, going up to 30%, which I have a hard time believing, as someone who was, born and raised there and who still has family out there. This is not the kind of thing that most people are actually interested or engaged in. The people who are, generally there are problems with the kinds of things that they believe that separatism would do for them, because they're being sold a false bill of goods, largely fueled by a grievance system that the Alberta government has largely been feeding the population for decades in order to cover for their own failures, but also for the fact that they are living at the mercy of world oil prices, and when those crash, they will always look for someone else to blame. That's partially why a lot of, the notion that Justin Trudeau thwarted their ambitions was pretty much false. Trudeau bent over backwards to ensure that they they got a pipeline, that they got all these other projects that through the process, to the detriment of his own political capital and to his own supporters, because he wanted to make that case for Alberta, that the federal government could work for them. And it was, in most cases, it was the fact that there was an oil price crash in 2014 before Trudeau even came to office that changed the economics of most of the oil sands plans that companies had in place, and they no longer made economic sense. But it was easier to blame Trudeau and, the attempt to reform environmental legislation, which was supposed to make things more streamlined and supposed to front-end load a lot of the stuff that should have been front-end loaded, but for various reasons was often not. So suffice to say that this, they were blaming the oil price crash on Trudeau and Notley, even though it happened before either of them came into office. And it has been fueling, using that grievance mentality to fuel these kinds of problems. I mean, this goes back to the 70s, one of the original oil price crashes after the early supply glut, and they blamed the attempted national energy program on that for all these wells shutting down and so on. It's like, no, it was not that. It was the fact that the price crashed and there was a global supply glut, and it no longer made economic sense to keep feeding that glut. But it made more political sense for them to blame Pierre Trudeau, and this has carried on for decades ever since. And it's important to realize that this is part of what's going on, and why it's important that people who have been mainlining this kind of grievances being force-fed to them, they don't actually care about a lot of the separatist nonsense, and a lot of it is, quite frankly, white nationalist and Christian nationalist nonsense. And as a result, I think we're kind of getting bogged down in this sense that these people are winning, therefore this referendum is going to happen. They're not actually winning, and this referendum shouldn't happen because a separatist party did not run candidates, did not win an election, did not win a mandate to do so. Taking over the UCP by stealth does not create a democratic legitimacy for such a referendum. But that's kind of where we are, because Danielle Smith has allowed it to happen, because that is how she sees her political fortunes continuing. She watched how this group took over the UCP, ousted Jason Kenney over vaccine mandates and stuff, which, again, even Alberta was the laxest of any province in the country. But they nevertheless weaponized the grassroots process, ousted Kenney, brought in Danielle Smith, who has done everything possible to placate these people, because she knows that they will eat her face if she doesn't. And so this is, I think, where we need to start thinking about how regular people need to start pushing back. It's not just voting in an election, even though that is very important. It's also getting involved in the process at the grassroots level. That means ensuring that you are helping to nominate reasonable and sane candidates. And it's also about ensuring that the party mechanism is not taken over by people who are trying to advance this cause. And that means, buying, regular people buying memberships. And in Alberta, for a lot of people, that does mean the UCP, because there's a strong brand loyalty to conservatism in that country, or in that part of the country, even if most people are actually fairly centrist in their beliefs, but they have that brand identification that they feel the need to identify with politically. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that you need to let the crazies run the party. It means that you need to get involved. You need to ensure that your voices are being heard, that you are helping to go through the process to make sure that you have reasonable candidates who are being nominated to run on the ballot, and to ensure that, you know, there are reasonable people holding the reins within the party mechanism. And I think that's where a lot of this discussion needs to shift, because we're letting too many people wash their hands of what's going on and saying, oh, the separatists are just such formidable political organizers that they're taking over. No, I mean, yes, they are good organizers, but that's because too many other people have ceded the field to them, and they don't need to, and they shouldn't have to. But the way to get around that is to ensure that the party is being flooded with normies, with regular people who do not care for this bullshit, and who can do a better job of ensuring that the party represents these normal people in the province. We don't need to be diehards in order to join a party, and we don't need to be diehards in order to take part in grassroots processes. This is how our system is designed. It's how it's supposed to operate, and that's at its most democratic point, is when ordinary people are doing the work at the grassroots riding association level. And for all of his sins, Jason Kenney did organize a party that had a strong grassroots basis. That is how the loonies have taken over the party, is because those mechanisms were there and not enough people were pushing back against them. But this is where I think a lot of Albertans need to start thinking about, in terms of next steps, taking out memberships and getting involved in those processes, because otherwise you're just handing a win to the crazies, and we don't need to do that. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale _no on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.